bring them here. Now, when Museveni said bring them here, the South African government warned and wanted to bomb us. In fact, there was a hot debate in cabinet where they were saying, chase them away. Museveni and his revolutionary colleagues, Eria Kategaya and late Kirona Kivijinja, may their soul rest in peace, said we cannot leave our comrades,
yes,
the South Africans. They said if they come to bomb, we can only defend ourselves. We can develop our air defense capability, but we can't be seen to be running in the face of the enemy. So the South Africans said we shall bomb you. So we brought South Africans here. And that is what ended up in Kawaweta training wing. So when I went to South Africa recently, I went to the Nelson Mandela prison, the famous Robben Island.
Robben Island.
Now, the guides who guide you in the visit were former prisoners with Mandela.
Okay.
Now, I was putting on my Ugandan T-shirt, Uganda Visit South Africa. You can't imagine, of all the big delegation, the man was interested in me. Why? Because in prison, they used to get information where their cadres are being trained. And so the man saw me as a real comrade, and he said, greet for me, President Museveni. He told me that, because he was now the guide. So you can't imagine that we are part and parcel of the freedom of South Africa.
Yeah, well, I think we'll pick it from there, because South Africa is one of the issues of the areas of our discussion today. Because we're looking at South Africa as one of the countries, you did mention it well, that one of the oldest political parties. Yeah. Or at least compared to NRM. But then, recently, we had elections in 2024, we had elections in South Africa, where ANC did badly.
Had to merge.
Exactly. Had to look for some other parties, in fact the opposition,
the DA,
yeah, to make sure that they can survive in the political turmoil.
Comrade Mutoza, there is something which Comrade Bora said, and I wish just to add something. You see, it is very interesting, given this beautiful history that Comrade Bora has just given us. You ask yourself that the young revolutionaries like Julius Marema, when you look at the manner in which he disparages President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, you wonder as to whether he is alive to the historical contribution that NRA made to the total liberation. Well, they may not yet be totally liberated as a people of South Africa, but at least the physical liberation from the shackles of apartheid that NRA and NRM, if you like, made to the South African cause. You wonder. You see, that is one, and yet these are the promising revolutionaries to take over the reins of South Africa after the departure of the Ramaphosa, the Zumas, and the like. At least they position themselves and they posture as the revolutionaries that are going to lead South Africa to the next stage. And yet they do not wholly appreciate the kind of contribution. And when you look at, there may be the civic. Let me also just a little bit comment about the civic awareness of the masses within South Africa. When you look at the xenophobic attacks that the South Africans cannot clearly identify who their enemies are, and they end up going against their fellow blacks, Nigerians, Zimbabweans. I'm even not sure that Ugandans are safe. You can see, therefore, in a nutshell, that there is quite a lot of work from the Pan-African point of view, which we must do to liberate our people ideologically. That is the beginning of solving the rest of the problems.
Okay, that's true, because we are looking at South Africa, much as there's a lot that was done in support when they were in struggle. And after they left the struggle, well, I don't know if they completely now free, they don't need another struggle. They seem to have forgotten that other Africans shed blood put like they say, they put their muscle there to ensure that South Africans get freedom. Where did that awareness end? Did it end with Mandela?
Well, I think in the minds of President Museveni, in his revolutionary spirit, he may not have expected a pay. He was not doing this to say, please, after this, you pay me. At least I know in President Museveni's spirit and revolution, he was just committed by saying, please, we want our African brothers free.
Be free, yes.
Same thing with Sudan, South Sudan. You remember when the Arabs were nearly enslaving Southern Sudan, the black Southern Sudan. It's the same revolutionary spirit Museveni said. Museveni said, no, you can't Arabanize it. And he took it. So, much as we didn't expect a pay, but it was such a huge cost. So their consciousness should have known that we don't want a pay. We did it because we wanted them free. And it was our noble, but simple, but great contribution. The awareness was in the, that's why I'm telling you, the people who were in jail, like this man who is now a guide, you know, they had a debate whether to change Robben Island into a disco place where people would go for entertainment. Nelson Mandela called for a reunion of former prisoners inside Robben Island. So he called a reunion. When they went for the reunion, they discussed, what should we do with this prison? Then the resolution at the reunion was that we turn it into a museum to refresh our minds and the minds of the world about the violations and never to go to it again. And it was resolved as a museum. It is not a museum.
Sure.
The guides, as I said, are those who are in prison with Mandela. They are all the people. But their consciousness is aware, because he told me when they were in prison, because I had one-on-one with him, he said they used to have political discussions. And that's how they would manage to find out that Uganda has committed to remove our fighters from Angola, to take them to Uganda, and that there's a revolutionary leader there called Museveni. He has said he will be with us, and therefore you guys let's be in prison, but outside we are safe. So the consciousness is with those ones. But the young one, of course, how many years have gone? It also depends. And the same thing we face here in Uganda. You will not be surprised when you tell some young people who said, we are tired about you saying we now sleep. What do you say in Luganda? Yes. You said we are tired of what you say. You see, you have this gap of the generation. But it is unfortunate that we forget where we are coming from. So the consciousness in South Africa is, it was with the older cadres, but honestly, it should come. But of course, when you talk to younger cadres, there are those who are aware. But as I said, it was not done for a pay. President Museveni, in his revolutionary spirit, the same thing he did to South Sudan, he wants Africans free. And also Ugandans free. So, whether their consciousness tells them this, but not to everybody. But if you speak one-on-one, South Africans can differentiate. Remember, this was a time when a country like Malawi, under Dr. Kamuzu Banda, would not. And there are some friendly countries even in the neighborhood. Most South African freedom fighters would go through Kenya incognito. They would only declare their freedom fighters when they reach Busia, Malaba. And Museveni's position was, if they declare in Malaba or Busia, go pick them. They were being kept in Serena and later on to Kaweta. It is good for Ugandans who want to know Pan-African to visit Kaweta and see the graves of our Pan-African, because they die. I mean, we die, even our own soldiers die in barracks. So those who died during the training, they are buried there. And the graves are there, well marked. So for the sake of Pan-Africanism, to show our contribution, I urge Ugandans to consider seeing where our South African brothers are laid to rest.
Actually, we also have a monument here at our Pan-African Freedom Square. There is a South African anti-apartheid monument there. So we can start from here, then we move to Kaweta.
Yes, but then back to that subject. We're looking at the, over time, that the South Africans seem to forget easily which is normal, especially in the African situation, that people say it is always good to treat one. When you treat one with a wound on the leg, it's likely when it's treated, he will use that same leg to kick you. Yes.
I think what is important here, really, for me, is that, and this one we are actually seriously on this point without probably not using so many words. The point is that even those who argue that patriotism and is not taught, that you have to act and you will be seen that you are a patriot. Frankly speaking, when you move to countries like DPRK, Korea, I've been there a number of times. When you go to China, when you go to, even in Japan, by the way, whatever they want to call themselves, there is the art of inculcating a spirit of patriotism and straightforwardness, appreciating what must drive your country forward, is what we seem to be either reneging on, or we are altogether forgetting it. Because you see, our brothers and sisters in South Africa and the Maremas and the group must be told who made a contribution, and you don't get tired from spreading that message. If, for instance, Christianity was not watered, or Islam for that matter, was not watered with constant prayer and reflecting on what the Holy Books say, the religions would be long gone by now.
Exactly.
There is no shame, therefore, in having Pan-Africanism, patriotism, taught or passed on continuously, like we recite the rosary, recite patriotism, Pan-Africanism, act it, speak it, and there is no crime in doing that. It is done everywhere, including the America, which poses that it does not do such a thing. Everything in there, everything, including a dining table, there is an American flag. A film like this, when you look at Hollywood, it is nothing but just a show of Americanism, for that matter, of Pan-Americanism, if you like. Therefore, for me, for us to be able to know who our friends are, who made a contribution to our liberation struggles, and we have been liberated and we still strive to be liberated from so many things, we must constantly be reminded. And that, in my opinion, constant reminder, teachings, will be a sure way of getting to know. Because right now, our problem, and the major problem, is clarity of mind, ideological revolution. We must therefore get the issue of ideology correct, that our mission now, after the overthrow of the physical colonial rulers from our continent, our problem is to identify which other elements of colonialism still persist with us, and we ideologically get clear what our problems are, who our enemy is, and we handle that.
Yeah, but also I think the problem has also been the leadership, because you only do that when you have a leadership which also has a clear vision. And then they would want to have a population coming after them with, carrying on that vision. Now, we have seen most of the political parties that have existed world over, including the West and wherever, India and China, that they have the mentorship programs for their would-be leaders, from the young into leadership. And I think that is what is missing. No wonder that because Malema was part of ANC.
He was actually groomed by Jacob Zuma.
Exactly.
Is a product of Jacob Zuma.
Of Zuma. So no wonder that Zuma could easily ally with him, and in so doing the disorganized ANC. Now, which means that therefore we may be looking at South Africa, maybe not looking at its colleagues and allies who supported them, ANC particularly, in the past, but also that ANC has more bigger problems within its own structures than what we can see from outside. Maybe that's the problem.
Now, first of all, there are two things. The issue of leadership and the issue of ANC challenges, the challenges of ANC. I agree with you that this awareness or even determination to do good, revolutionary good, rests with leadership. And that is why we see the pace, the tempo in which Uganda practically took up the support for South African struggle was seen in the presence of Museveni, because he had the clear leadership and the tactical and the strategic capability. This tactical and strategic capability differentiates it from rhetoric. Rhetoric would mean you go to AU and you make pronouncement. You go to UN, you make pronouncement. You go to conferences, you make pronouncement. But the strategic and the tactical capability means how do you, in practice, decide now through the state system, I pick the freedom fighters from Angola. How do I ensure they travel from Angola through Tanzania and where to reach Uganda? And again, how do I ensure they are kept and trained and fed? And how do I smuggle them? And how do I arm them? This is the strategic and the tactical capability that compared to the rhetoric where you go to conferences and seminars and issue statements in solidarity. We are with you in spirit. You are with us in spirit. What are you doing to show that spirit? So that is the clarity on leadership that you are saying. Now, and this was not in the Kamuzu Banda, Dr. Kamuzu Banda, the president of Malawi, that's, and his other colleagues. Now, if you transcend that challenge of leadership, or you now take it across the board. But back to the challenge of ANC, my view, and having taken these 10 days in South Africa, is that ANC, even with clear leadership, has inherent challenges in the nature of South Africa. Here is a country, first of all, from the north to the south is about 2,000 kilometers. Because from Joburg to Cape Town alone, remember Joburg is in the middle, is 1,500 kilometers. And during the apartheid regime, everybody was taken to IDP sort of, to camps. Bantustans. They left their land. Now, when these people came back, there's no land. So, however clear leadership is, to address that situation, to remedy, will cause problems. And yet people expect a solution. And people believe that to every problem there's a solution. People believe that even HIV/AIDS there's a solution. Only that our mind has not yet clicked the right solution. So this huge problem, even if you pose it to any party in South Africa, my view is it will be a problem still. Because Zimbabwe tried. Remember Zimbabwe, the whites had also taken the blacks away from the land.
Sure.
Mugabe decided to give back to the land. Oh my God, you see where they are now. They have been on sanctions, they have been what? Now you see the entire South Africa, people were taken to IDP camps, whether you are Zulu, whether you are Xhosa, whether you are what, everybody were in camps. The whole land was taken by whites. And it is good, really nice farms. You drive there and you see it. Now, what is happening now in South Africa is that you find every city, like you are entering Joburg, many people move by force to a free land and build houses made of, the top is iron seat, The wall is
Yes.
iron seat. No toilet, no what. And it's big. If you can see the size of the Zambia police barracks, it's like 5 times the size of Zambia. Every city, before you enter, you are welcomed by that. The message they are sending is, we don't have land. And that's why they invade the land, they stay by force. In fact, if you see the crime rate in South Africa, I am even thinking it is lower than it should be. Because how do you get these people staying in this kind of houses, in iron seats like that? Where do they live? Where do they feed? But the message they are sending is, we got the independence, we don't have the land, so we are staying here to show you. Okay. So how does a party like ANC come out of that? And when people still see that we got the freedom, and you can see even in many songs of Lucky Dube before he died, you know, a song is a reflection of materiality around us. Song is like a dream. You dream what is around you. That is why when a hunter will sing the birds and the animals they hunt, he will not sing about a computer. So now you see from the songs of Lucky Dube, it reflects what was there. So any party, whether the party of Malema, whether the party of ANC, whether what, the problem they have inherited is so huge that no proper party will come out of it shortly.
Okay.
Actually,
and that is why
the
they have it
argument
now.
of Marema is that by name, this is economic freedom party. And his is that he's going to redistribute the land, but also redistribute economic opportunities. Now, that said, I look at what happened in Zimbabwe. Comrade Uncle Bob, by the time he reached a conclusion of redistributing land to the Wananchi, he had made a number of agreements with Margaret Thatcher leadership. And all the leaderships in Britain were promising that this is a matter that they had agreed in principle to handle with him, such that we can get compensation and fair distribution. Actually, the ZANU-PF argument was not to take the entire land from these white people who virtually grabbed it. There was a popular, he's a lawyer, there was a popular judgment by one of the judges during the colonial time. And that particular judge in a land matter noted that a native, a South African, I mean a Zimbabwean native, is incapable of owning land, that he is not, is not aware that even land exists. Therefore, the argument that a native can be claiming land over a settler, a white person, cannot arise. You can imagine that kind of reasoning. And he gave a judgment in favor of a settler because, in his opinion, the native was incapable of
owning land.
Because he doesn't know its value. Now, if that was the mentality, even from the judiciary, from the bench, what do you expect that the political leadership was? And as I conclude on this, therefore, if the South African leadership, whether that is going to be ANC in conjunction with DA or whatever it is, whether it is going to be the EFF, if they do not resolve the issue of land, if the issue of land is not resolved in South Africa, South Africa's dismantling of apartheid is but a myth.
Maybe if, for example, we had earlier on said that to every problem there's a solution, only that our mind has not clicked. I don't know to what extent they may think the South Africans can be absorbed in service industry. Because if you absorb them in service industry, in medicine, in a law, in a mobile communication, in insurance, in hotels, in maybe tourism, I don't know what population can be absorbed. So that they now stay like you have in Germany. And you know, in Europe or in America, a small population own land and feed the entire country or the world, because it is highly mechanized, high technology. Somebody can have huge garden of tomatoes because he's going to use machine to harvest his tomatoes anyway. Now, if you think that, and you think you will absorb them in service industry, and they forget the land, that is still a huge task. But what I'm saying is that I don't want to blame any political party in South Africa, because the distortions was so huge that any political party coming on power, whichever genius or intellect, will still get problem. Because you are not going to get people, 90% of the people removed from the land, and you will take them back all of a sudden. Especially when you still have the example of Zimbabwe.
Exactly.
So however, I don't know how much they will want to absorb into service industry so that they forget the land, and how much they will get this land. And if this land is taken back, to what effect will it have on it? Remember, when President Amin tried with the Indians, what Zimbabwe is facing, Uganda faced it through Amin, because it is tagged to the economic system.
Exactly.
Either you face the challenge of mismanagement, or you face the isolation of the capital world.
Exactly. Because
these people own it in association or in the interest of the capital world.
But
so you will find that challenge. But all said is that I know in South Africa there are many options on the table. One of them could be absorption in service industry, but also somebody maybe will come up with a formula, because it is also not safe for the landowner now. The crime and the injustice, they're seeing the injustice. Right. So I think they may also be feeling and coming with a win-win, that you know what, this we need a win-win. Let's give part of it and let's do this. Because it affects all of them. Because even with your wealth, you are not safe with this.
Yeah, but at the same time, if, for example, and there are two examples you are going to use here. The first one, you said people will definitely not appreciate the sleeping if they're sleeping hungry. And sometimes if they don't have that, why they came to sleep. But also the issue of South Africa is that, given the example of Zimbabwe, if they give back land to the Africans, to the natives, will the land be productive to the extent that now help them get to work, and the issue of crime goes down? Because the Indian example, that President Amin got property which was supposed to be for the Indians and gave to Africans, and what they did with that property, you know the story. So, but the other option was to...
Do you want an answer to your question?
No, before we got that, maybe the other option could have been that you allow these people make use of the land if they can produce enough, and then you tax them. Then the taxes will be able to facilitate these people in the industry that you are talking about, because that is also could be an option. But is there a political party that can do that without ramifications in terms of elections?
Maybe I first answer your question on the capability or the capacity of the Africans to manage. I have no doubt in the capacity of the Africans to manage, because we, black or white, we are empowered with the same brain. And even if you argue that somebody will be corrupt, those temptations of corruption is both in
it's
white
all over.
and black.
Yeah.
So I have no doubt that the capacity to manage is there. Because even in South Africa, there are some isolated blacks who are farmers, including President Ramaphosa himself. They do. So there's no problem in the capacity building if you gave it to the Africans. The problem is, even in the same case of the Indians in Uganda, the problem is not that the Ugandan who got it were not capable. The problem is that when you get it, the outside capital squeezes you.
Exactly.
And that's the same thing in Zimbabwe. Not that the Zimbabweans who were given land cannot manage it. It's because when you give the land, the capital world, it's not about your ability to manage. It is the
Access.
force you get from outside.
Okay.
In terms of sanctions, in terms of denial of financial services, in terms of denial of market, in terms of denial of technology, in terms of denial of training, they just lock you up. So even if you have the capacity, that is more of a challenge than the inborn capacity of Africans to manage.
Yeah, of course.
Ndugu Mututa, I listened to Senior Pora's submission, and I agree. Some of these things, by the way, we would be doing them radically. But we are in a fast changing world. And the truth of the matter is that the ramifications that you are talking about, some of them is being rocked out from the capital world, like he's saying. We know for the fact that the imperialist, whether you do, as long as what you are doing is not what pleases him, he will certainly come up with a set of regulations which will impact you negatively. Cuba is a very good example. Venezuela, as we talk, is a very good example. And if you asked me, South Africa is another one. Question is, what wrong did South Africa do? In my opinion, nothing. The land belonged to the people, and there was no justification whatsoever for the Seychelles Rhodes to do what he did, to aggregate land and give it to the minority whites. And the same thing happened in the other side, South Africa.
Sure.
Our senior iconic Pan-African comrade Malcolm X, in discussing the issue of a slave, he talked about a domestic slave and also a third slave. And he says that if a domestic slave feels comfortable being in a home, sometimes he can even be given the old suit of the master. He feeds on the same food that the master eats, and he sleeps in a huge mansion that the white master sleeps in. But that does not make him the owner. In the same way, there is no way a native in South Africa will be comfortable in his country called South Africa if he has been deprived of one of the means of production. Land is a means of production. Mm-hmm. If he is incorporated in the service sector, very good. But what will be the actual contribution of a native South African to the country called South Africa and his own family if he is not owning land? My submission, therefore, is whether South Africa will go the Zimbabwean way or the Cuban way or the Venezuelan way of being rocked out from the so-called capital world, let it be. The land question in South Africa must be addressed, not by any other means, but by a percentage distribution of the same land to the people who are entitled to it. Whether the heavens are going to fall, let them fall. There is a way a society will always get out of the problem that it finds itself in.
Now, we are looking at South Africa, and we are talking about the developments that have happened on this continent of Africa. Now, we also look at what is happening, and I think both you raised the issue of the role of the judge in Robin or something,
the judge in Zimbabwe,
and Ndugu, which also talked about it, that the African, in the eyes of the colonialists, the African is seen as a person who is not capable of understanding and capable of doing a lot of things, even not knowing that what they have is of value. And that brings me to the discussion of that we can transition now what is happening in Mozambique. And in which talked about Mozambique as one of the countries that gave shelter to the freedom fighters of South Africa during the apartheid struggle. And I don't know, over time, and we saw this when we were discussing the issue of struggles that existed at independence and post-independence, that most of these struggles have now gone down and don't seem to have an idea on what happens after the African countries have got independence. And one of the cases now in Mozambique, for the last about 2 months, they have been in chaos. They got the elections and the winner won, but still the country degenerated into chaos. Frelimo won the election, and of course they have been in leadership from the time that country got independence. And what is happening is now, it is like the playback of when Frelimo and Renamo were struggling in this particular country. Now, much as it is one of the countries that supported the freedom in South Africa, the freedom in Rhodesia, and the country has now gone into tatters. In most cases on this show, and I've told the people that we can put blame on the colonialists, on the West for interference. But isn't this, as Africans, don't we also have our own problems within?
Now, the issue of Mozambique is quite puzzling, and it's a concern for us in Pan-African spirit. Mozambique went through a colonial master which was not interested in leaving Africa.
Sure.
That is the Portuguese.
Portugal.
While the British and the French were giving out independence, Portugal wanted to stay. And in most Portuguese colonies, independence was acquired by revolutionary struggle.
By force.
You can count them. Unlike British colony, like in Kenya, there was a bit of Mau Mau. In Tanzania, not. Uganda, not. It was peaceful. They had a policy. And by the way, note that at that time, the ruling party in England was also a Labour Party, which is a rather progressive party at that time. They are more progressive. Now, Mozambique suffered right from the struggle. And in particular for the struggle of South Africa, they really were frontline state. To the extent that Mozambique lost their revolutionary leader, Samora Machel, which was crushed in a plane crash, allegedly using the technology of South Africa.
Which was sabotaged, actually.
So they paid it, and their struggle with South Africa is so intertwined that the wife of Samora Machel was later married by Nelson Mandela. So they have such an intertwining struggle. Remember, they bought the South Africa from the north. And actually, Chaka Chaka, the musician, comes from a tribe which cuts across Mozambique and
South Africa.
South Africa. That is the tribe Chaka Chaka. It's not Zulu, it's not Xhosa. Chaka Chaka comes from the north, the Mozambique side. So, Mozambique has paid so much. Now, what has happened is that Frelimo, since 1975, has been in power. In 1994, they went multi-party, like NRM. And there is believed to be an agenda by the Capital West to unfold the revolution, starting with South Africa, Frelimo, Angola. All those are a target. And I think we should open our eyes and be aware in the Pan-African. So all efforts, remember the Capital One works in such a way that if they mean to deal with Angola, they put a desk. I assure you, there is an officer somewhere in America who has a desk about Angola, and his work is to deal with it. So the problems that are coming up are partly associated with the attempt to unfold the revolution from South Africa, remove all those revolutionary parties from power. Now it is alleged that in this last election, they held election on our Independence Day. Our Independence Day is 9th October. So they held election on the 9th. While we were celebrating 9th October, they were holding election. And out of it, when they said Frelimo had won by 63%, instead they caused a commotion where 250 people are believed to have been killed.
Exactly.
This is what President Museveni was saying here, that there was a plot to use the Iraqi returnees to cause shooting, so that you say it is the state. So we have to be very vigilant, because sometimes shooting will occur and you don't know where shooting comes from, when actually the shooting is meant to cause chaos. It is not the police shooting, it is not the military police shooting, it is not the army shooting, but you find people dead on the street. And of course the state being the monopoly of holding arms, you say it is you. You see. So Mozambique is a cause for worry for us Pan-Africanists. One, because we want the welfare and the livelihood of Mozambicans in place, but also two is that we have to guard against this attempt of reversing back
exactly
the struggle. So it is a big problem in
because
Mozambique.
I can agree with you more on that, because this is a country that has all the resources that you can think about. Mozambique is not a poor country, and they have been a frontline state in terms of struggle. In other words, the ideological awareness is high. They are not a small, a new state that you may think that they are trying to struggle to put their structures.
Just a moment. About the awareness, the Mozambican independence struggle was launched along with a very high degree of awareness. Why? They used materialistic science. If you talk to the cadres of Mozambique, many of them were exposed to dialectical materialism, historical materialism, and political economy. These are literatures, not the normal literature we find in some societies. Rich dad, poor dad. How to get rich in 1 month. As if you're a witch doctor. Rich dad, poor dad. How to get rich in 1 month. The struggle in Mozambique was strongly built, their awareness was strongly built on real hard natural social sciences, which helps cadres to develop their tools of analysis. It helps cadres to know what is wrong, what is right, why are we here, and how are we here, and how can we get out of here. And that can best be developed by literature like dialectical materialism, historical materialism, and political economy. Not rich dad, poor dad. How to be rich in 1 month. So I want to just fortify your submission that the awareness in Mozambique was high, and especially the awareness in Frelimo and the general public. Remember, it was a protracted struggle. The beauty of a protracted struggle is that you go along educating the people. The same thing NRM did. You go along educating the people. Not only do you educate the fighters, but you educate the masses. So the masses learn in the course of the struggle. The masses learn to support the struggle. The masses develop their tools of analysis and open their eyes. So the awareness is in Mozambique. I wanted to fortify.
No, but I can also agree with you on the same point, because when you look at it, if it were the elections, Frelimo got 76%, but through the court it was reduced to 63.
It's still a win.
Yes, and the opposition got about 20, and through the
24.
court it was increased to 24. Still, you see there is a gap that you can tell the winner. The election could have had issues, but even those issues could have been foreign injected. But I also agree that there's a problem here where you have people going in the streets demonstrating, and you hear the gunshots and people are being killed, to the extent that the whole prison like Luzira is opened, is attacked, and it means there were collaborators from within the prison and from outside the prison. Now, that shows you that actually the problem in Mozambique, as we speak now, is not only because of the election, but there is a hand somewhere that is trying to adjust the history of that country.
Let's remember this, Comrade Mututa, about Mozambique. Are you aware, or I want to believe that majority of us are aware, because I want to approach this question from the geostrategic importance of Mozambique as a country. Mozambique as a country has had rebel activities, especially in the northern part of it. If you call it civil unrest, whatever name you want to give it, the truth of the matter is that it has had those challenges. And what is also of critical importance is that Mozambique, like majority of the African countries, is endowed, richly endowed with natural mineral resources.
Exactly.
And one of them is natural gas. You know that huge amounts of natural gas were discovered in that country, and there were a number of bidders. China, the Portugal itself, the colonial master, American conglomerates, the majority of Europe, there were all bidders there. Majority of the power, the electricity power, if you like, energy that supplies Zimbabwe, comes from Mozambique. Now, the geostrategic importance of Mozambique, especially to the hegemonic capitalistic West, is so huge that it is near impossible, if the African Union and the people of Mozambique do not see through some of these things, to let Mozambique be. Mozambique cannot be, just like Venezuela cannot be let be, because of the importance she poses, the importance she has to the rest of the powers that are interested in the natural resources of that country. I've listened to my senior comrade Piero Lumumba. I've listened to my senior comrade, our own very brother, Kagoro, Brian Tumuta. And especially Kagoro Brian, he brings out the issue of the geostrategic importance of Mozambique, that even the antagonism, the seeming antagonism, political contestation within Mozambique, the Verencio and Marshall, those should have been the candidates, I think. The outcomes of the election and the participation of the Catholic Church to reconcile them, the participation of the neighbors to reconcile what is actually happening in Mozambique now. Yes, truly, is not unique, because we have had those challenges. It's not the first time we have had elections. In the same space, we have had elections in Botswana. They have been successful. We have had elections, name all these countries, apart from maybe Zimbabwe, where we had those challenges.
And Kenya.
We have had elections in Kenya, which almost went the way Mozambique elections went. But at the end of the day, we have reconciliation. Either way, the reconciliation comes up. What we have in Mozambique is a microcosm of what happens, largely speaking, on the African continent. Well, I will not say it doesn't happen elsewhere. You remember even here in this, is it Bangladesh? This country, which was directly destabilized by America simply because America had interests in that particular country and they were competing with China. They had to remove an entire regime. Therefore, if the conceptual West, the capitalistic West, will have Mozambique perpetually, like they have interested themselves in having the entire Africa perpetually in a state of war, they will have it. Where are we not having the war? On the African continent.
Exactly.
And you see, it will begin as an economic war. The unfair and democratic macro policies of the World Bank and IMF will play on a particular country to influence the politics of that particular country.
Okay. Now, which as we wind up on this point, I think we will have more time for this discussion, especially on the issues of Mozambique, because it's a very key, it's a very key country on this continent. But also want to look at the issues of what the other is African Union doing something to it, is the SADC doing something to it. I will see that, I think,
Mozambique
in the next.
SADC? Yeah, I think. Yes, yes. I think yes.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens there. But because of time, we shall be closing here shortly. Ndugu, which I think can make your final submission on this subject until next week.
My final submission on this subject, I want to say something about if an African country decides on the course it takes, whether Zimbabwe or South Africa or Mozambique, we have been talking about ramifications or what the capital West does. I want to illustrate it like this. In the case of Cuba and Venezuela, and by the way, on Sunday I'm traveling to Venezuela to be together.
For the inauguration?
Yes. I'm going to Venezuela. They have had election with their president for the presidential. So I'm going there to be part of the swearing in of the president, and I will be with the comrades. What they do, the capital West does, for example, the Parliament of the United States sits and passes a law that, and this law is applicable to Venezuela and Cuba, that if you deal with Cuba or Venezuela or Zimbabwe, this is the effect. For example, France will say, if you America are fighting with Venezuela, that is your war. For us, we have no problem. Now, if you say that to Cuba, the American Parliament passes a law saying, should your ship lands in the harbor of Cuba, the payment, because so far now the payment system goes through America, we shall not pay you. Then France or Germany say, but we are not part of your fight. For you, you are fighting with Cuba. For us, we are okay.
Or not.
Remember, in the case of Cuba, there has been 30 resolutions in UN. And all 30 resolutions are passed in favor of Cuba, except USA and Israel. 193 countries, only 191 vote in favor of Cuba. So that is the same procedure which can be used if you attempt to do your independent move. That is why there's now a form of the what? The BRICS. The BRICS formation is to dismantle that, so that you don't monopolize payment system. Because even now your Visa card is cleared from, if you go to withdraw money in Garden City,
just go to Washington.
Your money goes to Washington.
Even on the African continent, we are trying to have the Pan-African payment method.
So now the BRICS idea is, if you, Zimbabwe, if America doesn't agree with Zimbabwe and Uganda wants to pay, Uganda should pay without any problem, so that America sorts out their problem with Zimbabwe. So that is why BRICS, which are originally Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, that is what it is intended to do. It will make the world more justiciable, a more free world.
And because time has gone, but we shall begin that discussion from there next, because the world runs on economics. You cannot run the world politics without
But finally,
economics.
Bututa, the point we wanted to make really is that this you have provoked us at the last minute. I don't know why. The truth of the matter is that what we are experiencing in Mozambique is just a microcosm of what is happening on the African continent.
Exactly.
It is a bigger, broader agenda
we shall
by
discuss
the heuristic capitalistic
we
world.
shall discuss it much next week, because you also realize that, and for the viewer out there, you also know that part of the problems that ANC has been having as a political party is because of the BRICS connection, that South Africa seemed to be moving so fast, allowing certain things to happen which they shouldn't, and that is why we have all these problems. But we shall have all that discussion, and for the viewer who will also be interested in this discussion, please, next week we shall be having a lot of it. Don't go away. For now, we are stopping here until next week, and we wish you this beginning year to be a fruitful one and a blessed one for your family, for you, and for the whole country of Uganda and the whole continent of Africa. And thank the panelists who have been on this show, and also thank the team that has been behind on this production. Until next week, be safe and have a nice of the weekend. Until then, next week when we shall meet, have a nice one. Thank you.
UBC, inspiring Uganda.